Hello and welcome to e-luminate. My name is Madeline Peters and we're here to continue our discussion on the myth of Mars and Venus, looking particularly at the anatomy of the brain. And my guest today is Dr. Mohammed El-Majdoubi, Professor of Neuroscience at Dominican University of California here in San Rafael. Thank you very much, Mohammed, and let's continue with your excellent discussion and setting the context for our viewers to understand some very complicated information in a very straightforward way. We're now looking at the anatomy of the brain, so the program is yours.
Thank you, and welcome back. So now we're finally getting to my expertise and my original question, which was to research what's available in the literature to see what do we know about any differences, if any, that can actually explain the behaviors of men and women. So let me remind you, we said that the impact, the only two factors that can actually make us different would be the nature, our chromosomes, the hormones we release, or nurture, the expectations and the duties that are assigned to specific sexes. Now let's go under the hood to see if there is any difference and what is it due to. The first part we should look at is actually a part that's completed early on, that might not be subject to much nurture, and that we can see it at an early age, is the part of the hypothalamus. Now the hypothalamus is the mission center of the brain. It's the one that when you're asleep still takes care of your metabolism, your stress, your growth, your reproduction, who you are attracted to, your emotions, all that without us having to think about it. So it's subconscious area of the brain, and happens to be the area of the brain that secretes hormones, the neurohormones that govern our body. And this is early science that was even confirmed recently. That area of the brain shows differences that are very obvious. Those differences can be seen in the level of three nuclei. The first one is called the preoptic area, and that's the one that does determine who we are attracted to and in another nature, because we're talking about differences that are seen in humans, but also something you can see in rats and mice, and who we are to mate with. That one has different shapes when you look at it with a microscope, in the male and female. So you can actually see it with the naked eye, and you can decide which one is a male and which one is a female just by looking at it. The second nucleus that shows a difference is a nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that one is the one that regulates our reproduction, meaning the hormone we release, the cyclicity of those hormones, what hormones do we release when, ovulation and things like that. So we would suspect that this would be different because we know the reproductive physiology of male and female is different. That one has actually a structural difference in terms of even the shape and the number of neurons. The third nucleus that actually is different is what we call the mammillary nucleus, and that one has to do with our emotions. And again, given the difference between emotions in both sexes, it is obvious that those nuclei will be different. So those are nuclei that probably have been shaped by nature in what I called in the beginning androgenization, the masculinization of the brain with the neonatal testosterone during the third month or the 3 months of first 3 months of pregnancy. Now, the other part that actually the most controversial is the one we use to talk about intellectual capabilities of both sexes and whether males are better than females at some things and females are better than males at some other things. And that would be the cerebral hemispheres. First, let's clean up the situation. Um, Men have in general 10% bigger brain than women. However, if you take into account the size of the body and as a ratio, it's actually not that different. We used to think that the women have a biggest corpus callosum, which is the connection between the left and right hemisphere, and that allowed them to be more better at multitasking and verbal skills and things like that. That's now MRI showed that that's not the case either. So what is the difference then, and what can account for differences in behavior other than the subconscious part of the hypothalamus? The only studies have shown any difference is a study that's shown that the connectivity in the brain of males and females are different. That's called the connectome. We're studying now. We have a different kind of MRI that can follow the fibers. We know, not looking at the shape of things, but how they connect. And it looks like females have a connection that favors the connection laterally between the left and right hemisphere, which means they can use fully the brain for a lot of things. Males have actually a processing that's parallel. A lot of things happening, but on their own. Take an example, the ultimate example of maleness will be an autistic child. So now hypothesis is that autistic children, mostly boys, are actually just a brain that was hyper masculinized. So it's basically a hyper male. But when you do look at anything else in terms of intelligence, in terms of how we resolve memory, three-dimensional reconstruction, spatial memory, language and all that, there is no difference. We don't see any difference, at least visibly at the level of the brain. And therefore, in my opinion, there is nothing that can support the fact that males are better at something than females, or man is good at engineering and leadership and technology, and women should be teachers and nurses. All the tests that have been shown that males and females, men and women, are equally equipped to resolve any problem the same way, but through different approaches. We think about something, we find a solution through different ways, but we get there. And an example is what BBC have run through what we call the Battle of the Sexes. Is 300,000 people have signed up for this worldwide study in which tests were made, and you can just do it at your home with your computer, and they showed that there is no difference in any of the tests, except that the way the questions are asked, sometimes they favor man's point of view. Let's take IQ. IQ is very male-oriented, and now we know IQ is not the only thing. Intelligence quotient. Now there is emotional intelligence. There is artistic intelligence. There is so it's just the way we framed it that's different. Otherwise, in the brain, in terms of why women cannot go to science, why women cannot be engineered, has no basis in the brain.
Well, Mohammed, again, you've done an exquisite job of setting a context for understanding the similarities and differences between men and women. I am very fascinated by your description of how women problem solve, how men problem solve, and approaching the same problems from different angles, but equally equipped to solve any problem together. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to be here. My name is Madeline Peters. This is e-luminate, and our guest today is Dr. Mohammed El-Majdoubi, discussing the myth of Mars and Venus. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your time. I like to always summarize it when I talk about males and females with just hands. I have a right hand, I have left hand. I don't think one of them is better than the other. They don't match when I put them together, but they match when I make them work together. So I think the key here is that we need to collaborate in an equal way. We're not unequal, we're just different.